So, welcome to Après Midi in Nice, and we have a full house. I'm very, very pleased to see all of you, and I'm so excited to introduce Jeanne Oliver. Jeanne Oliver, where's your book? Nice Uncovered. That's called Naked Nice. No, no.
That's an idea.
So that, how do you like that title?
I like it. I like it.
Okay. So Jeanne spoke at the Meet the Authors event. C'est en vidéo. Vous êtes en vidéo en ce moment? C'est vrai.
Alors juste, je vous coupe une question pour que vous puissiez travailler tranquillement. Est-ce que vous préférez régler maintenant ou terminer?
Non, à la fin.
À la fin.
En bas.
Alors je vous souhaite de bien travailler. Et je vous emmène.
Merci beaucoup. Okay, so that's the announcement I forgot to make. Okay. So everyone on video gets to hear that. You're going to pay for your drinks on the way down after, okay? And the cash registers on the, no. Down,
directly under us.
Directly under us. Okay, everybody got that, including the audience that's watching this? Great. Okay, back at Naked Nice. No, Nice Uncovered. So Jeanne spoke at a Meet the Authors event, which, by the way, this year is on June 1st. So mark your calendar. Ella Dyer is the host of that event. I'm the MC, and we've got a lineup of really great authors. Okay, but this is where I first met Jeanne. And I have to tell you that this book, okay, which she is going to tell you all about herself, this is the best thing since peanut butter. I mean, to tell you, I've learned so much about Nice by reading it, even when I'm not on the street taking the walks. Just going through it because it's fascinating. So she's going to do her thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's what I'm gonna do.
She has already sold all of her copies that were here.
No,
so,
one's left.
First hand up was Penny Zerkert's hers. Okay. But you can go on Amazon and order it easily enough. Okay. No big deal. And then you're going to love it and you're going to all be walking around Nice.
Yes.
Okay. On that note, Jeanne Oliver.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that lovely introduction. Yes, I am the author of Nice Uncovered, Walks Through the Secret Heart of a Historic City, 7 walking tours through the most fascinating neighborhoods here in Nice.
What have I got? I've got a, okay, wait, I'm getting there. Okay, we're back.
And so what qualifies me to do this? I've been living in Nice since 1999. I was living in Paris 8 years before then, and I was a guidebook writer, and I turned out books for Frommer's and Lonely Planet, and it's been about a variety of things, but also about Paris and about Nice and this region. So I thought, well, you know what Nice needs? Nice needs a little bit more of an in-depth look, more of an in-depth guidebook, which didn't exist. When I was in Paris, I wrote a book of walking tours for Frommer's called Memorable Walks. I really had a lot of fun doing it. Didn't take too long, only 3 months, that's fine. So I thought, I'll do one on Nice. And so I started this actually in 1920. No, 19. Wait a minute. No, wait, no. 2020.
That was a long time ago.
So then the pandemic hit, and I realized actually this wasn't going to get done in a couple of months because there wasn't that much really available, even in French about Nice. Not like Paris. There's books and articles all over the place. Nice, that's not really true. So I realized that this was going to take quite a bit more time. And with the pandemic, of course, I had a lot of time because there wasn't too much else to do. So this book was kind of my way of dealing with the pandemic and have a project. And it kind of, writing it really, I had to do quite a lot of research and biking around town because we were allowed to go out for a period of time to see these sites. And it really got me to see Nice in a very different way. I couldn't travel anywhere. So I traveled in Nice, in my hometown, I consider it. So it enlightened me a lot about Nice's fascinating history. So today, I wanted to mention, I also do audio tours for a company called Voice Map Me. You download the app free on as an app in either the Google Store or the iPhone App Store, and it will play you an audio tour. It's GPS enabled, so you can put your phone away and listen to me whispering sweet nothings about Nice in your ear as you walk along. So, but today's lecture, what I'd like to talk about is was derived from the second walking tour, Navigating Nice's Bella Polka Guide to Our UNESCO Heritage, which, we were named a UNESCO site 3 years ago. And in July of 2021, it was really an honor. It was after a long...
It wasn't 1921, right?
No,
I'm sorry, I'm just being stupid.
The next slide, thanks. We were named a World Heritage Site in July 2021, and the UNESCO designation called us the Winter Resort Town of the Riviera. And that was the basis of our unique contribution to World Heritage, as I like to say. And in explaining this, UNESCO went into a lot of detail about exactly what it is that makes Nice so special. In so many words, it comes down to the fact that Nice, beginning in the 19th century and lasting up really till the end of World War II, really developed around the needs of foreign visitors, like us, for example, foreigners that came here first visiting and then to live here, foreigners from America, from Britain, from actually Russia, all over Europe, came to Nice, and it was catering to the tastes of foreigners and their habits and their pleasures that really dictated the urban landscape of Nice beyond the old town. So we got this designation from being multicultural, actually, from drawing influences from a lot of parts of the world, and also because of our beautiful architecture and urban landscape that resulted from that. Next. Winter Resort Town. So this is the designation of UNESCO Nice. As you can see, it's quite extensive. It does not cover the old town, charming as the old town is. I know we've all wandered those streets. It's quite lovely, but it's medieval. The old town.
But why didn't it cover it?
Because I'm going to explain.
Okay, never mind. Jumping the gun.
Shocking but true. Shocking but true. It's because the old town is a medieval town, and our unique contribution really was developing as an urban resort city, winter resort city on the sea. The medieval old town really didn't develop that way. I'll get into a brief overview in just a minute, but it was really everything that started in the beginning of the 19th century onwards that has really made us unique. So that's what I'd like to go through today and introduce this to. So you'll see this heritage, saw the pink.
I want to make sure that the HDMI cable is working.
Okay.
Okay.
It works. You can see this extends all along the Prom, practically to the airport, up through the Carré d'Or, Quartier des Musiciens, Jeanne Médecin, also the area to the east, all the way up to Cimier, and a few little pink blotches where the old Russian neighborhood of Piole was, and also past Libération, which also developed at about that time, and also the Colline de Chateau around the port, and all the way to Montbaron. Next. So just to give like kind of a brief overview, the medieval old town developed in the 17th century mostly 18th century, after the inhabitants of the Colline de Chateau, Castle Hill, were chased out because it was turned into a fortress. At the time, ever since, in fact, the 14th century, Nice was ruled by the Dukes of Savoy, based in Chambéry up north, and then in Turin in Italy. Nice was part of their whole territory, and they kept it actually until the middle of the 19th century. So it was a long time of Savoy rule. So the Colline de Chateau, Castle Hill, which is in fact where Nice was founded by a long time ago, classical Nice, ancient Greeks and Romans. Then it became a fortress under the Dukes of Savoy. And then it was put under siege by Louis XIV, Louis XIV of France, came in, basically took hold of the town and the chateau at the beginning of the 18th century, and blew up the fortress, blew up the walls, and that was the end of Nice as a fortified town. So that was in 1705. So what happened then, so the chateau, that was in smithereens, and that was developed later. So what that did, though, was it opened up a whole lot of new territory for development. So you have your medieval old town, which is really more on the eastern side of town, around the Place Saint-Francois, if you know that area. That's the oldest part. And then the part around Cours Soleil and heading west, well, that was really open to development. Then we start with the new Nice, because once the walls came down, you had all of this new territory. So actually one of the first neighborhoods to get developed was around where the Opera is. So that's the Opera, it's on Rue Francois de Paul. That was set up in the middle of the, well, more towards the end of the 18th century as an elegant shopping street. So for them, medieval Niçois, that was New Nice. It was nice, it was elegant, and also around the Palais de Justice, that was opened up for development. So your better families, the Lascaris family, aristocratic families, tended to move out of the old part of town, which is crumbling, and into these newer quarters. So, but then what happened?
Yeah, but I have a question.
All right.
I mean, I have a bone to pick with UNESCO. How do they say Nice is a heritage site and not include Old Town? Well, I mean, I just can't get my head around this.
Well, write a letter.
Yeah.
But
I mean, I did understand, but I still.
Well, they adopted the plan of Nice, so I think your bone to pick would probably be even before Estrosi. Certainly with Estrosi, he started the campaign to get Nice a World Heritage Site,
Right.
And it has to be unique contribution, and so that was their theory, that Nice as a winter resort is what made it unique. There are a lot of, I love the old town, I really do, but there are also towns in Italy that look kind of the same or very similar. There's parts of Ventimiglia that look the same. So architecturally, it was not, there's nothing really unique about it. But these UNESCO areas, that made Nice really unique when you think about it. I'm not going to say Nice invented modern tourism, but almost. Not too far away, really, because Nice was very fast to figure out that tourism was going to be their future, and I think that's what made it unique. So let's go on to the next slide.
Okay, and I don't know about the screen. The screen's going in and out, and I have no control. Okay.
So around towards the end of the 18th century, you started to see some British that were coming down to Nice. Nice was a way station on the grand tour that every young, educated, cultivated man had to make from Britain. They had to go down to visit Venice and Florence and Rome, and the classics was part of a classical education. So Nice was kind of a way station, more or less, for these guys. Come to Nice, take a break, and then go along the Italian coast and go down through Italy. And then around the end of the 18th century, a Scottish writer came. His name was Tobias Smollett, and he wrote travels through France and Italy, which became a big bestseller. And he talks quite a lot about Nice in his book. It's quite adorable. You can get it, in fact, for free. It's in the public domain. He talks about life here and the farmers. And, well, it sounded very attractive to people stuck up in north in Britain, suffering through gloomy winters in London and Scotland. It's like, sounds good to us. Nice, warm, sunshine sea. So once they became aware of that, they started coming down, not too many of them, the end of the 18th century, beginning of the 19th century. And they had, not too many places to stay because the old town was crowded. And then the newer part of the old town, well, the aristocrats had that. So they moved to another neighborhood called the Marble Cross. But they came down, why? It wasn't just a holiday. They came down for their health. Respiratory diseases were a big thing at the time, especially tuberculosis. And doctors up north had the idea, sunshine, Mediterranean sunshine is going to do you a lot of good. And people got sick. Go down to the Mediterranean, fresh air. It's nice and warm in the winter, and it's going to do you good. So people came down really to get the fresh air and to get the sunshine. Problem they had, there weren't that many places to get fresh air and sunshine in Nice. There was forests really right down to the water's edge. And then there was the old town. And then there was this place, Les Ponchettes. Do you know where this place is?
Sure.
Yeah, it's on the eastern side of Courcelette. At the time, it was called Les Terrasses. And this was built on top of the walls in Nice that had been blown up or essentially demolished because we didn't need walls anymore. So town planners in the 18th century said, I know what we'll do. We're going to make a nice promenade on the top for our citizens. So it was first for the wealthier people in Nice that wanted to take a stroll. You can go on to the next.
You can't go up there now, though, can you?
Yeah.
There's a small part of it.
Oh, there's a small part to go up, but you can't walk along it, right?
Oh no, you can't walk up.
No.
You can
You can go up
see-
the stairs.
You can go up and see and take a look at it. This is kind of, well, this is much later, of course. This is kind of, you can see what it looked like. But there were plants up there. It was really very popular. So when the British came down here, they wanted to do this. It's good for their health, try to get some fresh air, a nice seaside walk. You can go on next. But it wasn't really close to where they were staying. Were they staying? In the Marble Cross area. Do you know where that is? Yeah, it's on it's on Rue de France, right off of Rue de Congrès. You have this beautiful kiosk.
Oh, of course.
There. Yeah, looks familiar. That was the neighborhood for the first British arrivals. They called it the Marble Cross neighborhood because of this cross. It dates back to the 16th century that was built there. But the British all settled there, and they called it New Town or New Borough. They brought their goods from home. There were little shops there that had sold things from home. Doctors, pharmacists, everybody spoke English. It was like their own little community, which was really nice. They rented little houses there from the inhabitants, who I guess were the forerunners of Airbnb back in the time. They knew a good thing when they saw it, these people. So next. So the problem that they were living in the Marble Cross area, which was here, but they wanted to get here to where the nice healthy walk was on Les Terrasses, but in the way was a river, which is now the Jardin Albert Premier. At the time, it was the Payonne River. It still is, actually, but it's covered over. So there was no bridge here. So what they had to do was walk all the way up here, cross the one bridge, Pont Vieux, and then make their way through the old town to Les Terrasses, where they could take their healthy walk. Well, they didn't like that at all. This was unacceptable. It was a long walk. They did not like going through the old town. The old town at the time was filthy. You know, they're there for their health. They don't want to like see rats running around, obviously. So it was filthy. It was also very poor, and this distressed them. They had a sense of equality. This is very distressing to see the poverty and the filth. So they wanted a walk that was nearby. And so what did they do? Well, they got together and they raised some money for it. Go next. They raised money through their church, which is now the Holy Trinity Church. At the time, back in the beginning of the 19th century, it didn't look like this. This was much later. They only had permission to have a very little building as a church. Why? Well, this was a Catholic area. This was under the control of the Savoy Dukes. This was Catholic. The British were Protestant. So the rulers were a little dubious about giving them permission to like put up a big church. So they had a very little church that they said, you can have a church, but it can't look like a church, has to look like a villa. So they had like a little villa, and that's where they gathered. And that's where they raised money for the very first Promenade des Anglais. The Reverend was the Reverend Louis Ray. He raised the money from his parishioners to do it. And it was partly they wanted to take their walk along the prom, but also it was a charitable thing. They said, we're going to be giving work to this local populace who's very impoverished. So it satisfied really both urges. So the first Promenade des Anglais was really quite short. It only ran from the river, which is now the Jardin Albert Premier, to Rue Meyer-Bear. So it was a short walk. Okay, they weren't into big hikes at the time. Nice little walks, just fine. But it got them, you know, out and along the sea and getting their much needed fresh air. So that's what they did. So that was in 1822. And then again, you know, they were still getting more and more tourists. So the Savoy Dukes, they could see that this was a good thing that was happening here. So they lost no time in extending it, which they did in about 1840, and then again 1856, and then eventually, of course, it reached the airport. But the very first promenade was just 2 meters wide. It was very dusty. This is kind of what it looks like. This was 1840, right before the extension opened. So once you had that open, and once it extended for a bit, well, then things really started to take off. Then you had, of course, for people moving here, they needed to have hotels. You take the next. So more hotels came up. This is the Hotel West End. This is the oldest hotel on the promenade, dating from 1842. Wow. So the hotel business really started to grow. You could take the next. And the other important feature that they had, in addition to promenades and the construction of new hotels, the other thing they started to think about were gardens. This is what our holiday visitors like. They're coming here for the fresh air. They're coming here for leaves and, you know, pretty flowers and trees. Let's give it to them. So they began the first Jardin Albert Premier. This is obviously not what it looked like then, but this was where the original Jardin Albert Premier was. It was all the way over on the west side. So that was in 1852. This was a big hit. It was really it was a park right on the sea. They could stroll along the sea and then go into the park, and then there was bands, and it's a nice place to promenade and show off and wear your nice clothes. And this was a major hit. So, but it was still limited in size because you still had the river. That Payonne River was not covered over yet. But once it was, and that was 1856, then they started work on that. Then the Jardin Albert Premier expanded on and became the size that we know it today. And if you look at the Jardin Albert Premier, the way it's constructed, actually, it's wider near the sea than it is inland, because the idea was to sort of create something like a river flow. You know, so the wide part is like the mouth of the river, even though it's a park. So that was really another big feature. They planted it with exotic trees. And they also planted the Promenade des Anglais with our iconic palm trees, They're not native to the region. What prompted it? Again, the foreigners. The foreigners, they like exotic vegetation. We're going to give them exotic. We're going to make things look nice, and so people really feel like they're on holiday. So this is really quite some time ago. You can really see the thinking of the people at that time, our forerunners, to create this and to kind of have a sense of what people wanted. So the Jardin Albert Premier, it wasn't the only garden that was planted. Also the Colline de Chateau, Castle Hill. They cleared away all of the rubble and rubbish from the walls being, the fortress being blown up, and they turned that into a nice promenade with also very pretty stairs going up. It's like, this is nice for our visitors. Also, the Garden Vigier in the east of France, in the east of Nice, at the foot of Mont Boron. That was also done at the same time. So you see these gardens crop up that were just really very beautifully landscaped and designed to create a nice environment for the foreigners. So, okay, next. So who is doing all this? Who is making all of these plans? Well, it was the Consiglio d'Ornato that was making these plans. Consiglio d'Ornato. It's an Italian phrase that means the Ornament Commission. So in 1832, the Dukes of Savoy, who I have to say, I think for, you know, a monarchy, you know, not democratic, I think they ran things pretty well, my opinion. They did have a sense for how they want to have vision of the future. So in 1832, they set up this commission because they knew foreigners are coming and we got to organize this. We're going to need more space. We're going to need to develop space. We're not going to just like sell it off to the highest bidder. We're going to do this in a methodical way. And they did. They chose people who were notables, you know, some judges, some politicians, but also some architects and landscape designers got together. And it was them that planned out how Nice was going to look and essentially really shaped the urban landscape of most of Nice that we see today. Everything had to go through them. Somebody had a building project or project to develop streets. Well, it had to go through the Consiglio d'Ornato first. That was really important. They would regulate the height of the buildings, what it looked like, and how far back from the street it had to be set. For example, if you walk along Victor Hugo, I think it's such a very beautiful street, you'll notice that the buildings are all set back from the street. You had iron gates first, but you had to be able to see through. They decided that. They wanted that street that was set out to be a walkable, pretty and walkable street with trees and leaves. So it was not by chance that it developed that way. No, they knew what they wanted and they set the rules for doing it. So it was very influential. The Consiglio d'Ornato lasted from 1832 to 1860. And then in 1860, what happened? Well, the Dukes of Savoy were pushed out. Nice voted to join France in 1860. They were kind of set up for it. France had allied with the Savoy, who were with the Sardinians, very complicated, but they wanted to curb Austrian influence. And so they came up with the Treaty of Turin that gave Nice to France. That was the price of France's support. They give this Nice, and then they set a vote so people could ratify a decision that was already made. I'm not so sure that vote would pass the UN's Commission on Free and Fair Elections today. Maybe not, but it was, I mean, it was mostly pretty popular, the vote, for the main reason that people at the time were a little mad at the Savoy Dukes. They were popular for a long time, but in 1850s, they took away Nice's status as a duty-free port, which Nice had enjoyed, and that was bad for the economy. There were riots. People were really angry about that, and it was to profit their other property, which was Genoa. So by the time the vote came around, people were starting to think, well, maybe it's time for new management here. We'll see. So in 1860, it became part of France, and but the commission's work continued to regulate what Nice was going to look like. And then the other thing that happened was the opening of the train station in 1864. This is very, very big development because before it was kind of hard to get here. It really was. You know, you were coming from Britain and a bunch of coaches with luggage and you'd hire people and it was days and, wasted. It was an arduous trip. So only really the richest of the rich could afford to do that. When the train station opened, oh boy, anybody with some money, okay, it's not for peasants, but still an affluent class could afford to make the trip. And that's when these really started to take off. Because after the train station, why did they put it there? It was funny, they had planned, it was opened in 1864, planning started in 1860. So, oh, we're going to put a train station here and here. And the newspapers were like, that's crazy. It's like countryside. What are people thinking? Putting a train station in the country for? Ridiculous. But what they didn't know was that the commission had already decided that they were going to develop that neighborhood. They knew when they put the train station there was going to be a whole neighborhood around it. And that's ultimately what happened. So a lot was built really to feed people into the train stations. You see the Avenue Jeanne took shape essentially to have a very nice, very prestigious street that would be kind of a beeline from the town center to the train station. And then also streets like Boulevard Victor Hugo and the Quartier Musicien developed around that. So it was developed, that Quartier Musicien developed about the same time, grid-like streets, make it easy to get around, to make it nice and walkable. So,
it has its own mind, okay?
So after the train station opened, yes, a lot more hotels. I mean, before the train station, like 1850s, there were like 30 hotels. By the time of World War I, there were like 130. So Nice was really exploding. The Hotel Les Palmiers, this is very pretty. It's on on Boulevard Victor Hugo. It's now a residence. Hidden behind this scrum of trees. It was built as a hotel, south-facing windows so people could get the nice sunshine. Okay, and also Hotel Beau Rivage, built in 1870, right after the train station. Again, south-facing windows to soak up that beautiful sea view. And that was quite popular. The writer Anton Chekhov came a few decades later and spent some time in the Hotel Beau Rivage. And then 1916, Henri Matisse came. He just loved his room and he painted from it. So that now it's a residence, but that really put them on the map. So we're talking a little bit, we've been talking mostly about the British that came. They weren't the only community that came, though. Russians were also very important to the early development of Nice. So they started coming actually in about a few years before this church was built, about the late 1850s, because the widowed Tsarina Alexandra came. She loved Nice. Where Tsarina is coming, of course, there's going to be other people coming right after her. So a little community developed. It was more or less the same neighborhood as the Brits, that Carré d'Or. And she raised money also, like the Brits did. Got to have a church to build this first Russian church, which is on Rue Longchamp, not too far from here. She raised money to build that in 1860. She, of course, had the same problem that the Brits had, which is like, well, it's an Orthodox church, but this is a Catholic place, so it was tough for her to get commission. She had to use a lot of her political pull to get permission to have a church at all, and there was no cemetery attached to it either. So she only had permission to get this very small church. The ground floor was not even a church, it was a library. And then they worked with a Nice architect to have like this lovely Byzantine style thing. The cemetery thing was like kind of a big issue because remember people came here who were, well, sick actually. You know? They were kind of sick, and so some of them, you know, were not healed by the Nice's magical sunshine and fresh air and whatnot. So the first British church, the Holy Trinity, actually got permission from for a cemetery there, which is quite interesting. If you ever want to take a look at that, some of the early Brits that visited here. Russian church, they didn't get a permission for cemetery. They are buried in Kokad Cemetery, another nice trip out west Nice that I recommend. It's a very beautiful cemetery, Kokad, and it has some Russian nobles actually that are built there, also Brits, overlooking the sea, quite beautiful. But the Russian community was very strong around the Tsarina. They grew and grew, and then eventually moved up to north of the train station to the Peel neighborhood and built this very beautiful Russian cathedral, which is in 1914. So also Americans started coming over early in the 19th century, but it was the beginning of the 19th century. It was a tough trip when steamships were developed into ocean steam ships. That was 1838. Then it became a lot easier, and so then you saw many more Americans coming over. And of course, they were mostly the wealthier ones. J.P. Morgan made the trip and raved about Nice. The Americans settled in pretty much the same neighborhood as the British did. And first they started going to the same church, the Holy Trinity Church, but that didn't work out well. There were problems.
I wonder why.
Personality problems. It didn't work out well. So they realized they needed to have an American church. So they raised money for that. The Vanderbilt family gave quite generously to build it. J.P. Morgan, Jay Gould, the big industrialists at the time, made sure that the American community could have their church. I don't know how religious they were. I think it was kind of also a way to make social connections.
Political.
What?
Political.
Yeah, possibly. So this was known as the American Church up until about World War II, and then there was just not enough of the American community to support it. The American Sixth Fleet was based in Villefranche up until 1960, but once they left, the American community kind of dwindled. I think maybe we're starting to build it back up again, possibly. But at the time, through the late 19th century and up until World War II, I mean, it was really the American community was quite important. And eventually, they started coming really not so much for their health. I mean, it was just fun and prestigious. And later on in the Roaring '20s, well, it became really, Nice was fun city. The auto races up and down the prom, and the hotels along the promenade were built with outdoor terraces. Americans really liked that, you know, drinking out on outdoor terraces. They didn't care that much about TB and respiratory illnesses. It was really, you know, socializing, drinking, and partying. That was essentially the idea. Continue. So we've been talking a bit about the communities that have made it here, made Nice special. But the other part of that gave us this UNESCO designation really was the architecture, which is quite extraordinary all throughout the UNESCO designated areas. So let me show you a few of my favorite buildings. The Belle Epoque was kind of covered everything from 1860 to the outbreak of World War I. And that was a time when, as I say, a lot of rich people were coming here. They wanted, too much is not enough. They wanted ornate. They were also quite cultivated people. They had traveled around quite a bit, and they were familiar with various architectural styles. So they came with ideas. I like neoclassic, I like neo-Gothic. Notice the American and British churches really like that neo-Gothic look. But a lot of the wealthier people that came here went for a more classical look. They like to have an ornate facade. If you got it, flaunt it. So that they hired architects. Nice at the time really started to get quite a stable of local architects. Charles Delmas was the guy behind, the architect behind this building from 1868. And he designed a lot of the more iconic buildings from that period. So when you're coming out of the tram line at Jean Médecin, do check this out, this BNP building. It started off as a hotel. It's on the corner of Geoffroy and Marshal Geoffroy and Jean Médecin. So it started out as a Hotel des Îles Anglais, the Hotel of the English Islands, and then eventually transformed into other things. But then again, this was on Jean Médecin, which was very prestigious at the time. So this is an example of very beautiful Belle Epoque style. This, I don't know, you probably passed this a million times, right?
Been in it a million times.
Yeah, been in it a million times. But this is actually considered a real architectural landmark. It was the Credit Lyonnais building, 1881, and this is what they call Palladium style, which kind of is related to Venice style, with the columns and this very beautiful facade. So I say they kind of mixed a variety of different elements in building these buildings. This is right on Jean Médecin, the Chenem. There's other buildings there. If you go into Zara, that's a gorgeous building. It's really a nice.
Ella lives in that building.
Oh! 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 Of course not. You're classy. But yeah, so Jean Médecin, was created kind of to be like another Champs-Élysées, and everything had to look good and be elegant. So you see some nice buildings there too. This is the Musée Massena, 1901, still Belle Epoque. These neoclassical columns there. This is built for Victor Massena, who was the grandson of André Massena, who was served with Napoleon, and Napoleon liked him a lot. He called him his darling of victory. So André Massena did well. So Victor Massena built this residence. He left it to the city of Nice on condition that the gardens always stay open to the public. Wasn't that nice?
And they are gorgeous.
They are beautiful, yeah.
Right.
Beautiful gardens.
It has a very good gift shop too.
Okay, there you have it.
Important things.
Okay, next. This is another real classic, the Palais Meyerbeer. This is on Victor Hugo. This is a historic monument and protected, particularly for this beautiful frieze of the cupids on top. That's really a feature of the Belle Epoque era, the sculpted friezes, particularly with fat cupids. They really like that. But this is really quite beautifully done, beautiful facade from 1908. There's only 6 apartments in that building.
What?
That's true.
Oh my God, how big are they?
Very big. Very big.
Yeah.
A favorite of Russian oligarchs, as it turns out. I have inside information.
Next.
Okay.
Here we go.
That was, this is the same architect, actually, Villa Maisonette, the architect Adrian Leeds, L-E-Y, a Nice architect. Also really liked, this very highly ornamented facade. It's quite close to the Meyerbeer. It's on Maréchal Joffre. Also very pretty. Go ahead. The Palais Baretti. This is also a historic monument. This is really, really gorgeous. Built for Dr. Baretti, a very wealthy doctor, who had his roots in, the family had its roots in rural France, which is why there's these sculpted bull heads on the front. This is on Maréchal Joffre. It's something you should really try to see. The very beautiful painted exteriors. This is actually the elevator. It was built as the elevator shaft. But all around it, the building is really quite gorgeous. It's one of the landmarks of the neighborhood. Villa La Belle Époque. Here also you can see the sculpted frieze at the top. That was from a Nice sculptor, Michel Tarnowski, who did that. And that, 1911, this is starting to get to the last gasp of the Belle Époque now. But you'll see a lot of Belle Époque in the Carré d'Or and Quartier Musicien, also on Boulevard de Cimier. But the Belle Époque was about to get blown out of the water. Continue. But before it did, we had the Hotel Negresco, which was kind of a combination of styles, little Baroque, little Belle Époque, little neoclassic. This is, of course, Nice's iconic hotel, started by the Romanian immigrant Henri Negresco, who opened this in 1913. It was the opening was attended by 7 crowned heads of state, so it was super prestigious right from the beginning. The chandelier, they had a chandelier in the which is still there in the ballroom. There's like domed glass there, which is not made by Eiffel, although a lot of people think so. It's not true, but it's in the style. So that was an immediate hit. It's the only hotel on the promenade, really, that's as prestigious now as it was the day it opened. But unfortunately for him, 1913, whoops, World War I, 1914, bummer. So that was really a big blow to Nice's. It was a big blow to him because obviously tourism dried up, and he lost control of it, I think, by 1919, 1920. It fell onto hard times, and then in 1950 it was sold to the Augier family, Paul Augier and his daughter Jeanne Augier, who took it over and really rebuilt it, had lavish furnishings on the inside, and amassed quite an art collection. It's really something to see. I mean, you can't just walk in. They are not going to allow that, but it certainly is worthwhile to have a drink in the bar or something just to really see that interior. It's quite extraordinary.
You used to be able to just walk in.
Yeah.
We do it.
Can you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You just dress really well and look like you know where you're going.
You look like you belong.
Right.
I
Go right.
Idea. So, and then talking about fabulous architecture, maybe many of you have heard of the Casino de la Jetée, 1891. An earlier version was built in 1881, burned down, and then they rebuilt it and opened this up. It's about where Roule Plage is now. And it was built at a time when, I mean, Nice was not the only place trying to become a winter resort. There was Biarritz, there was Deauville, there was San Remo. So around the end of the 19th century, other places got wise to this whole resort thing, and they all started trying to outdo each other in what they could offer visitors. So Nice, when they built this, thought, I think we have them now, because this was really quite spectacular. Gaming rooms, very plush on the inside. Gaming rooms, because casinos were such a big thing. Libraries, restaurants. That unfortunately, it was the pride of the Riviera. There's pretty much 1 million postcards and paintings of this, which you can find. And by the way, now the Musée Massena is running until May a virtual reality entrance into the Casino de la Jetée.
Oh, that's good to know.
Yeah, so it's a little hard to find. They're not really publicizing it that well, but you have to reserve in advance. You can't just show up. But it's free if you have the museum pass, and
It's
not
so
too expensive.
sad to look out and not see it. I mean, whenever I look out there, I think, why is this gone?
I
And
know.
don't you think we need to get Estrossi to like create a project to rebuild it?
Yes. Yes.
Let's start a petition.
Yeah. So this lasted until I think, as many of you know, the Nazis occupied Nice, and in 1944 there was just too much iron and steel, and they basically blew it up or dismantled it for armaments. There is a little piece of it that remains.
Yes, there is.
Where is?
Over at Saint Roch by the Marché. The chandelier is there. It's the centerpiece of the cathedral.
Okay. Well, I don't know if it was, that's the cathedral. In any event, a part of the structure remains. It's in, you're not going to believe this, but I swear it's true. Underneath the castle hill, there are tunnels. Yes, there are. And they were first sunk by the Italians. They may have been there for some centuries, we don't know. But in any event, the Italians sunk some tunnels. And then the Nazis also, when they occupied Nice, they also dug out some tunnels there. It empties onto Castelplage, one of the tunnels. It's not clear what they plan to use it for, maybe launching U-boats or something. But tunnels there are, and there is a little piece of the stairway of the Casino de la Jetée, which is in the tunnels, which you used to be able to visit on the Heritage Days, Journée de Patrimoine, but for whatever reason you can't. So the staircase is now safely ensconced there. So, but notice like how the this very exotic kind of Moorish style. This was another thing that they really liked at the time, was exotic styles. Go ahead. So this is in Cimier, actually. It was built as the Hotel Alhambra. You see, it's kind of a similar thing with this vaguely Moorish minaret kind of look. This was, again, 1890, 1900. This was a popular style, exotic. They liked that, and you'll see it in some places in these. That's what I mean. At the time, there was really a mishmash of styles going on, from Belle Epoque to exotic to Art Deco, which made its appearance after World War I, when people started drifting back to Nice. Then there were the Roaring '20s, and the Americans came in force during the Roaring '20s. The Palais de la Méditerranée was financed by Jay Gould, the American financier, financed it, and he made sure that it kind of lacked for nothing. It was spectacular on the inside. Again, you know, Nice was determined to stay on the map of winter resorts. Nobody's going to beat us, so they spared no expense for the Palais de la Méditerranée, which also had these massive vaulted rooms, massive gaming rooms. It was also massive staircases, but in this very beautiful Art Deco style. You can see a little bit. If you look at it on the top, you'll see these figures carved on the top. So Art Deco came in essentially as a reaction to all of those cupids on the Belle Epoque. Done with the cupids, we're going to go for nice clean lines. It was a more modern look. After World War I, people needed a new look, and Art Deco really filled the bill. So the Palais de la Méditerranée was, you could probably say, its apotheosis in Nice. And we'll see some other beautiful examples. Now all that's left is the facade. Mm-hmm. So does anybody know the story of the Palais de la Méditerranée? The murder? The murder story?
No, tell it.
No? So after World War II, casinos were a really big thing. And so the Palais de la Méditerranée had a casino, and the Meridian Hotel at the time was the Hotel Roule, a very beautiful Belle Epoque building. That was the other casino. So you entered the period of what's called the Casino Wars. It was heavily infiltrated by the mafia, frankly, and there was a great deal of money involved. So what happened with the Palais de la Méditerranée, it was family owned. It was owned by the Leroux family, and was doing quite well. They had a daughter, Agnes Leroux, who fell in love with the wrong guy. She made a mistake. She fell in love with a local lawyer called Maurice Agnelet, and he was older and, kind of a slick guy. And he was linked to the mafia, had some dubious connections, let's say. The mafia had already controlled the Roule Casino, and they really badly wanted this. So Maurice Agnelet convinced Agnes, this rather naive daughter, to sell her shares to him, and to place the money, to sell her shares to him. The money would be placed in escrow. So that way, the family would no longer have a controlling interest in the company. And then that would go to this mobster guy, Frattoni, who already had the hotel rules. So she did that, and then she disappeared mysteriously and quite permanently. So then embarked a criminal case that lasted for several decades. In fact, Maurice was accused of the murder. He completely denied it. There's a lot of documentaries on this, a lot of films, a lot of documentaries. He denied it vociferously. There wasn't that much evidence. With some business with a letter that she may or a suicide note that she may or may not have written. So he was, free, and then he was brought back and brought to trial. Then he was convicted, and it was vacated on appeal, and then he was free, and then he was brought back, and then it was vacated on appeal. This went on for quite some time until finally, it was only in 2021 that he died, and completely, never admitted his culpability there.
Sounds like Donald Trump.
Yeah, that's okay. It does. So, but in any event, so the bad part, so it still is actually quite a mystery. I'm not really sure where I fall on that, but I urge you to try to catch it. It's on Arte or some of the French stations every so often. It's still talked about, but the bad part was that she kind of the family did lose control of the Palais de la Méditerranée, and it was then essentially put up for auction. They went bankrupt. There was maybe a night of very crooked gambling. There was a lot of stuff happening at the time. The mayor was Mayor Jacques Médecin. And which I'm not going to say he was corrupt. That would be defamatory. But I will say he found himself in Uruguay, the one country that doesn't have an extradition treaty with France. So that he did do. So there were a lot of real estate shenanigans going on at the time. So she was not able, she ran around really trying to get it classed as a historic monument. She finally got Jacques Lang, who was the French Interior Culture Minister at the time, to declare the facade a historic monument, which is why we still have this beautiful facade. But everything on the inside, everything, all of the Art Deco stuff was just like all carted away and sold. So that was, but now it's, at least it's back and people are there, though you can't see too much of the original version of it. But yeah, the Art Deco part was marvelous. Here's another very nice Art Deco building. This is Palais Marie on the Boulevard Victor Hugo. This was by a famous local architect named Dikomsky, who did a lot of buildings in the Quartier de Musiciens. You see the very beautiful lines. He worked a lot with gold, which was uncommon at the time. So that's one of the nice buildings on a very beautiful street. Palais Marie, 1930. Another nice one, La Rotonde on Gambetta. It was also a Dikomsky building, a very beautiful painted. So it was ornamented, Art Deco with ornament on the outside, but in a different way. They liked mosaics, they liked painted, a paint on the exteriors, and again, very clean lines too. Palais La Mimosa, 1938, a little later, also on Boulevard Victor Hugo.
Bruce, that's your building, Bruce and Kathy.
Yes, really? Oh,
yeah.
Well, it's a nice.
I love that.
Famous buildings for famous people.
Only this is 48 hours that we've had this apartment. So
Oh, really? Whoa.
we'd like you all to come over, but
Well,
we don't have the key.
well, they
Soon.
well, their offer was accepted 48 hours ago. So, but it's beautiful bourgeois apartment.
Oh.
I love that.
Let's all go over.
You see, what's nice here is like this was supposed to resemble waves, these balconies, and that's something you see on quite a number of post-war buildings here, these curved balconies.
Well, that's the thing about the Art Deco buildings is that because the Belle Epoque buildings don't have elaborate balconies and terraces, but the Art Deco buildings do.
Yes, that's right.
Right.
Okay. And then the post office, which this is also considered an architectural landmark. It's in brick. Very few buildings were in brick at the time. Notice these very lovely, very Art Deco-ish frieze, these heads here. So that was considered.
It's across from the train station.
Yeah, right across from the train station. Okay. And La Pergola, also in Rue Verde, also a very
gorgeous
pretty building. Not signed. We don't know who the architect was, but
how dare they? I said, how dare they not put an architect on it? There must have been a big battle over that.
Probably. So we've been concentrating mostly on Central Nice, but there were other neighborhoods too that developed that are also under UNESCO protection. Montbouron is one of them. A lot of historic villas there. The Chateau de l'Anglais, 1858, was built by a British guy, Roger Smith, I think his name was, who had served time in the British Army, serving in India. And so he was very influenced by Mughal and Indian architecture. I think that's being renovated now, the Chateau de l'Anglais. But there's some lovely buildings on Montbouron. Then there was Cimier, which that took off when Queen Victoria came in was about 1890. She stayed here first, the Grand Hotel de Cimier. It's now a hospital, but it's quite pretty. If you're ever up there, take a look on the interior. Also, that was one of the first lovely buildings up there. And then she, Queen Victoria, had the Hotel Regina Excelsior built for her. She had a whole wing. And so once the Queen came, of course, you know, the place gets a lot of prestige. So then Europe's nobility, you know, followed her along. So all along the Boulevard de Cimier, you're going to have some really outstanding Belle Epoque buildings. Not so much Art Deco. I think Art Deco, you'd have to, it's pretty much the Quartier de Musicienne where that took off. But Cimier is another very lovely place for buildings. And then West Nice, the Villa Les Pommiers, which is the municipal archives. It's and that you actually can visit the out. This is all quite open. So this was from 1840, the Villa Les Pommiers.
Where is that?
Excuse me?
Where is it?
It's in my neighborhood, Fabron.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's in Fabron. It's quite an extraordinary building. It was built in 1850 by a man called Gaston, and he received Napoleon III there in 1860. It's quite extraordinary. And then he went bankrupt. There was some bank crisis. That was the end of that. But he sold it to a guy named Gaspar, who brought in tons of Carrara marble from Italy. It's an extraordinary place, actually. I recommend taking a look at it. But outside Parkland, you can really just walk into the fountains and all of that. And the interior is the municipal archives, which you have to kind of find an excuse. Sometimes they have expositions, so it's nice to see what they did on the inside of that. And then Gloria Mansions, that ended on my kind of personal favorite. I really like this building. Gloria Mansions was 1935. This is on the Rue de France. It's right behind the CUM building, CUM. Really quite an extraordinary structure. The outside is modeled on the Chrysler Building of New York. This was in the 1930s. This is also a national monument. The interior is this is all staircases. It's quite spectacular. The interior is closed. You know, I'm not saying you should wait around until somebody leaves the building to see. I would never say that.
She didn't say that, but
I wouldn't say that.
no.
I made friends with the guy in the ice cream shop. And
Yeah.
he had a friend coming out who let us in.
So, but that's it's quite a lovely building to see. Yeah, right behind CUM, you see it marked outside.
What's the cross street?
Excuse me?
It's on Rue de France, and what's the cross street?
A Grosso.
Oh, okay. So it's as far west as Grosso. Yeah. Grosso Cum. Grosso Cum, right.
As far west. So, you know, I hope that this gives you some idea of the kind of the beauty and the reason why we got this UNESCO Heritage designation here in Nice, that this is really only a small part of the architecture, but it's the most centrally located. So I hope it gives you an idea for, yes?
In your research, when did you find out about the great heist of Societe Generale in 1976?
Oh, right, yeah. That was, right, that's in my book. Well, that was, what's his name? That guy. They dug under the street and managed to get into Societe Generale for like this major heist, and made off with it. And then they eventually captured the guy and brought him to the Palais de Justice for to meet with a judge, but his Confederates had it all arranged. His Confederates parked a motorcycle under the window where he was being held. It's in my book, actually. I even point out the window.
It is.
The Palais de Justice. And during the hearing, the guy just got up and, you know, jumped out
onto the motorcycle.
Onto a waiting motorcycle, and that was the end of him. They never did find him after that. That's one of Nice's great
I love that. That's hilarious.
Yeah. But the great stuff. I think they've made movies out of that, actually. I know they have.
Yeah, I'm sure.
No, I read up on them. Like, no one they didn't use any weapons. They, so no one got hurt. They didn't use any weapons.
Right.
They were able to do the whole thing.
Knee arm, knee head. Right, was their motto. We've had some great heists. Nice was really, I mean, during that period, I think it was like the 70s, 80s, Nice was really kind of crooked, actually. There were a lot of scandals. Yeah, the Jacques Médecin, there was a reason why he ended up in Uruguay. No extradition treaty and then they eventually went and got him back and dragged him back to France.
Which one was it who died in the arms of his lover?
I don't know. It sounds familiar.
No, I think you're right. Wasn't? I think it. Felix Faure. Yeah, Felix Faure.
Felix Faure. Okay. Right.
Yeah.
But yeah, Jacques Médecin really did take charge of post-war Nice, and like the Palais de la Méditerranée. I mean, he wanted to turn that into something resembling Las Vegas or something. He was really, I don't know, I wouldn't say he was on the take, maybe. Well, there's a reason why they, went and fetched him from Uruguay. But he did do quite a lot of damage. Quite a lot also in West Nice. West Nice now has the building that I just showed you, as well as the Musée d'Art Naïf, which is quite a lovely building. But there were some pretty incredible chateaus there that he got destroyed to put up, housing developments. I'm not bitter, but I'm bitter, but it's would have been better for you there. So yes, some of the information that I got comes from my book, Nice Uncovered: Walks to the Secret Heart of a Historic City. Others are on the audio tours, Voice Map Me. I have the QR code here. You can just scan it. With the audio tours are very nice because you download the app for free, and then you put your earphones on. You'll have me whispering into your ears where to go and to tell you everything. And it triggers automatically through GPS, which is nice.
That's
so
amazing.
You can put your phone away, and as soon as there's something to say, my voice will come on again and then gives you directions. So it's a nice way. It's becoming an increasingly popular way to discover Nice. So, so do we have any questions? Questions, comments? Yes.
I noticed there are a lot of much more modest buildings that have the word Palais.
Yes. Okay. Palais. The only thing it means is residence. That's all. They put Palais just to indicate that it was built as an apartment building and not a hotel.
I noticed if you get an index that lists all the Palais in the town,
yes,
it seems to have more significance than just name.
Well, no, it just shows it as a residence, but obviously it looks quite prestigious. I think for their foreign visitors, it was very nice to write home to London that you were staying in the Palais Marie. And much nicer than staying in this apartment building.
We named one of our fractional apartments Le Palais du Soleil. Yeah, of course.
Yes. Did you have your hand up? Oh, I thought somebody else did. Yes.
What do you think about the modern Nice development? What is going?
I'm sorry.
Modern Nice.
Modern Nice development.
Modern Nice development. So yes, that's interesting. So they're taking the Promenade des Paillons. In the center of Nice, and they're going to be extending that promenade. they toured down the Théâtre de Nice, TNL, and also the Acropolis. These things were built again under Jacques Médecin. Not like I'm bitter, but he really kind of liked this monumentalist architecture, and Estrosi really doesn't. So the idea is to extend that promenade de Paillon all the way to the Bibliothèque and the library and beyond. It's going to become a very, very beautiful, well, the Promenade de Paillon is already quite nice, actually. So that's going to extend it. And then there's going to be there's another project in West Nice along the Bar River that is slated for development. It's a very, very beautiful park. You know, now you have the tram line going up to Saint Isidore, but that's going to pass through a very beautiful and very developed parkland there. So those are the main things. He was talking about having a gondola between Nice West and Saint Laurent du Var, aerial tram. Yeah, that's aerial tram. But there seem to have been problems with that, so I'm not sure that's going to happen. I think the tramway eventually will be headed further west to Saint Laurent du Var and maybe Cagnes-sur-Mer in the future. Yes, anyone? Yes.
Do you know anything about the Marché de
the Marché de la Bouffe.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Mainly, that was also from the Carré d'Or, that was the Marble Cross neighborhood where the British had originally settled, the neighborhood for foreigners. I think that they just could not really make money on that. The merchants there fought for quite a while to keep that open, but I think people were just not patronizing. It is being redeveloped, yeah.
I hope so.
But not as a market, I think, right?
Oh, because I think the one thing Nice is missing is more open air markets around town.
Yeah.
Which is in Paris, every neighborhood has one.
I know.
Saint-Roch. Maybe. Right, but not in the central. Yeah, but you go down to Buffa and around Gambetta, and it's not there.
Yeah.
There's nothing there.
I know. Oh, they had one around my neighborhood, which is Fabron. It was a few years ago, and it was just like a little market down there, big fanfare. But I don't know. It lasted a couple of years. So I think people were not patrons. People don't want to pay the prices. I think sometimes that these little markets have to charge. Maybe. So I don't know. Yes.
It's the story about the cannon on Castle Hill at noontime through the English gentleman who.
The truth behind the real truth behind the noonday cannon. No, it was not to call his wife back because she was late for lunch. No, this Englishman very much loved astronomy and timepieces. Actually, that was his hobby. He was an English gentleman. Every English gentleman had to have a hobby in the 19th century, and that was his. So he noticed that all of the church clocks in Nice, everybody was ringing in different times. So he said, no, that's not good. Everything needs to be synchronized. So it was him that started the cannon to make it noon. So all of the clocks could synchronize, and everybody knew what time it was.
So how did that other dumb story start?
I like the other dumb story. Is great.
It's true.
That started, but it circulated for quite some. It's only been in the last 5 or 6 years that the truth emerged on that.
And okay, so Jeanne, do you know the story about the Apollo?
Oh yeah, the Apollo.
Yeah.
Oh, on Place Massena.
Yeah.
So yes, so that was taken off for quite some time. I think that was maybe under Jacques Médecin, and maybe I'm just blaming him for everything that went wrong. But it was scandalized, the local population, Catholic town. I think it was maybe after World War II that was taken off. He was a naked, naked guy. They didn't think that was right. So,
but his hands are really big. Everything matched with his hands. So if you go and look at it, I can sort of understand.
So it was under Estrozzi that he had it taken back. Funny story. I remember at the time, so I was in Nice at the time, and I seem to remember hearing on the radio that Estrozzi quipped when he had it put back, "Oh yeah, that was modeled after me." I remember when I wrote the book, though, I thought, well, let me see, is that actually true? And I wrote to his press office, and they thought it was kind of funny, but they couldn't confirm it, and I can't really get old recordings from Riviera.
But he did get whittled down, didn't he?
He was?
He got whittled down.
Yeah, the statue.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
Yeah, because he doesn't match anymore.
It's whittle. It's
whittle, right. But his bones are still good.
I don't know if it was modeled. Anyway, I don't know who was modeled. Yeah, scandalized people. Anybody else? Questions?
Anybody have any other questions?
No.
With regards to UNESCO designation, what does that mean with regards to they can't change any of those?
Yeah, essentially, yes. It means that to make any kind of like they couldn't just like plow up the promenade, and replace it with something else. So they would have to then go through the UNESCO commission for any major changes. I think that would apply if they wanted to like add new streets to the Quartier des Musiciens. Whether it goes to the facade of the buildings, I think that might be covered by some other things, some of the buildings, especially in the Quartier des Musiciens or on Joffre or Classe, so you can't really change the facade. So there still is, I think, a certain amount of control that's exercised. Excuse me?
Only in the areas defined as UNESCO.
Well, that's very particularly. Then you would have to run any major change past UNESCO. But even other changes, like I know in the old town, if you want to paint your building, you just can't be any old color. You have to go to an authorized paint store, and they'll sell you an authorized color. Yes.
But I also know that in that area, there's a lot of buildings that I would not consider particularly attractive. Yeah. I live in one on Mr. Hugo. And
right.
So,
right.
But I have great views of beautiful buildings all around.
Yeah.
So that's the key. Okay, having the view of the good buildings.
Absolutely. I love my view. But so that's why I think it's kind of interesting, like if it controls all of that,
right.
or only certain buildings.
Well,
Mine was built like in the 60s, not quite communist block, but almost.
Right. Yeah. No, I know what you mean. Also on Boulevard Simier, there was a lot that was torn down. I mean, look, the Meridian Hotel, there's some people who are really still bitter about that, that they tore up the hotel rule, just quite beautiful, and then replaced it with that. So a lot of this did take place in the 70s, 60s, and 70s. I think that now, if you wanted to like tear a building down in a UNESCO protected area, you'd have a problem doing that.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not asking to have it.
Okay.
Because it was only in 2021.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
That it became
Right.
Yeah.
It's just interesting because there are these. I mean, I'm surrounded by beautiful buildings, but there are these pockets of like,
Brutish.
Yeah.
Should have been protected earlier.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
I mean, well, would it have been?
Right. Right. Yeah. I mean, I think it's certainly under Estrozzi, they've gotten a lot more rigorous about. Maybe even before him, there was that guy's name. The mayor before him wasn't too bad. So a lot of it was under Jacques Médecin that so much disappeared. He wanted to really kind of, I mean, that's with the Palais de la Méditerranée. He had this vision that Nice was going to become the new Las Vegas, you know. So.
Well, yeah, and I have no idea what was there before.
Right.
They built my building. I don't know if it was a beautiful down or if it was vacant lot.
Yeah. There's. I have. I think in my book I have one old picture of Victor Hugo.
So, you know,
Well, the Splendid's part of that building.
Mm-hmm.
The Splendid's part of that building.
Right. So
Yeah.
I'm saying that block.
Right. The whole block.
I know what was there before all that was
right.
like in the 60s.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah.
I know the architect's
name.
He dared put it on.
Sometimes it's not so easy to figure out the history.
You know, could have been an improvement at that
You
point.
never know.
Right. Well, it was a hotel and a residence.
Oh, yeah. There you go. For sure.
Jeanne, do you know the age of the buildings along Rue Masséna?
Well, this again, I mean, in this neighborhood, nothing really would have been before the train station, you know. Or, well, it wouldn't have been before 1840, I don't think, here. That's when, I mean, this is a part of the Carré d'Or,
right.
So.
I'm just wondering how old my own building is.
You don't know?
No, I don't.
I mean, there might be.
I can look it up. Okay, I'll look it up. Okay, I'll Google it.
I mean, it kind of really depends. I mean,
Patty's checking right now.
I mean, I know in my neighborhood in Fabron, there's lots and lots of new buildings, but there are still some buildings I can spot that were probably 18th century just by the look of them. So I think it's kind of a building by building thing.
Right.
Because this neighborhood would have had, it was farmland, but there would have been, even before the 19th century, some individual villas there. One nice building that's really right nearby. Look at the Café Magenta on Rue Longchamp. That is a very gorgeous Art Deco building. Recommend you take a look at that on your way out. Rue Longchamp has some nice buildings.
Well, you know, we did not have too much trouble getting permission to change our balconies. Because originally my building had one triple balcony and then a tiny single balcony on my floor and then no balconies on the upper floor. But we now have 3 triple balconies.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
And then, of course, I noticed that the port's part of the UNESCO, and they're getting ready to do that big convention type area down at the port. And so that's also part of the UNESCO. Of course, the UN is sponsoring that or paying for part of it. So.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, the renovation of the parking lot at the base of the port.
Yeah.
Oh, maybe.
Yeah, the Quai des Etats-Unis around the Monument Memorial, all of that's going to be slated. That's not that attractive, though, is it? I mean, the port is, but I don't know about that.
It's a parking lot.
Yeah, it's a parking lot.
Yeah,
exactly.
but they'll make something great out of it.
No, that's what she was saying. How attractive is it now?
Right, not
not
but
so much.
I remember the Promenade de Paillon, and it was a park just filled with homeless, and it was awful.
It was awful, yeah.
Yeah, with the train, with the bus station and all of that.
So
yeah,
that's definitely a one of the, and also there's going to be a park built in West Nice now. That whole area is slated for massive development. Around the train station, Saint Augustine.
Oh yeah, the Saint Augustine.
Is that ever going to finish?
I'd like to know. There'll be a bus station there.
Tram line 3 is a sea of cranes.
Oh yeah.
And we counted like 16 of them. We were the rugby game at the little rugby stadium. I mean, you look out and it's just a sea of construction.
Yeah.
That's that way. So it's not like there's any lack of construction.
That's right.
We're exploding.
How many years now?
Right, yeah. But I think there's a part there that maybe they've had some subsidence problems, right? You've read about that around the train station in that area.
You mean drugs? Drugs? What did you?
No, subsidence.
Oh,
Subsidence, right.
subsidence.
Problem,
I thought you said
so
substance.
It's quite
I was thinking
long-lived.
about
And
substance
then
abuse.
also there's the drugs and Les Moulins.
Yeah.
So, any other questions? Well, I hope it's given you a better, thank you, a better way to look at these and enjoy these.
Thank you so much,
Oh,
Jean.
it was a pleasure.
You have to read the book.
If you want my cards here, I have cards here. If you want to get in touch with me for any reason, walking tours, whatever.
Thank you, everybody, for coming. Please do not forget